West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and around the world on wadr.org. This is NEWSLINK, and here are the top stories. Guinea's transitional president Doumbouya declares 3 days of mourning after deadly central hydrocarbon depot explosion. International Organization of La Francophonie suspends Niger following July 26 coup. The majority leader in Ghana's parliament leads the shooting down of reform proposals from the Electoral Commission.
A mark which shall so far as possible be permanent and shall be made on the voter. The usage of operation where the certificate shall. So it is not at the discretion of the Electoral Commission or any official of the Electoral Commission to assume a discretion and go ahead to put aside the law and do whatever they like.
And Nigeria's government slashes public transport fare by 50% for Yellowtide celebration.
In the spirit of Christmas and the end of year festivities, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, has approved that the federal government should intervene to bring down the cost of public transportation to allow our compatriots who want to travel to do so without stress.
Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Imo Edit with NEWSLINK.
Many thanks for joining us and a warm welcome to our listeners in Liberia, the Gambia and Ghana. A 3-day national mourning has been declared by the Guinean Authority following Monday's explosion at the Central Hydrocarbon Depot. Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, who addressed the nation on Wednesday, commended the national and international solidarity displayed in the aftermath of the fire. He urged citizens to strictly adhere to government measures to manage the crisis, which has impacted various sectors of the country's economy and society. Doumbouya's message, eagerly awaited by the Guinean populace, came 3 days post the explosion.
L'incendie dévastateur a provoqué des pertes en vie humaine.
The devastating fire caused loss of human life, injuries, and significant material damage. Faced with this painful ordeal affecting the entire country, I decree a 3-day national mourning in tribute to the victims, the serenity and calm, discipline by respecting the instructions and directives of the government and the specialized services to allow us to gradually resume activities. I call on everyone to continue to maintain serenity and calm.
Et les services spécialisés pour nous permettre de reprendre progressivement les activités, notamment à Kaloum.
Guinean Transitional President Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya speaking there. We now head to Mali, where the authorities on Wednesday summoned the ambassador of Algeria to the country. The Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Abdoulaye Diop, in a statement, expressed Mali's strong objection to recent actions by Algerian authorities purportedly related to Mali's peace process. Diop criticized Algeria for holding high-level meetings without informing or involving Malian authorities, especially with individuals hostile to Mali's government and with factions opposing the peace agreement stemming from the Algiers process. Diop emphasized that such actions risk harming bilateral relations and constitute interference in Mali's internal affairs. He urged Algeria to engage in direct consultations with Mali's legitimate authorities. They highlighted Mali's historical ties with Algeria and its appeal for Algeria's leadership in international mediation efforts for peace in Mali. Meanwhile, Malian cleric Chouala Bayaya Haidara was detained by the cybercrime unit on Wednesday for allegedly discrediting the state. A viral video shows a member of Mali's High Islamic Council criticizing the government's actions and the country's power outages. As Abdullahi Hassan reports, Haidara arrests has sparked protests from his supporters, with religious leaders reportedly mediating to ease tensions.
Following his questioning by the Judicial Investigation Brigade on Tuesday, he was arrested. On Wednesday, he appeared before the Specialized Prosecutor for Cybercrime and was subsequently remanded to Bamako prison. His arrest has stirred outcry from his followers and advocates who are calling for his immediate release. In a circulated video, the preacher strongly criticized the political and judicial systems for detaining certain individuals, describing such detentions as excessive and unwarranted. In a separate video from last week, the member of Mali's High Islamic Council expressed concerns over electricity shortages. The authorities contend that these actions breach cybercrime laws and emphasize the need for responsible online behavior. Last October, the Malian Minister of Justice urged citizens to uphold the dignity and rights of others when expressing opinion or sharing information. A trial date has not yet been established, but there are reports of efforts by Muslim groups and religious figures in the country to mitigate tensions.
Abdullah Hassan reporting there. The International Organization of La Francophonie, OIF, announced on Wednesday the suspension of Niger, where military regime overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum on July 26. David Vincent has the details.
In a press release dated December 19, 2023, the International Organization of La Francophonie, OIF, announced the suspension of Niger and called for the immediate and unconditional release of President-elect Mohamed Bazoum, reports the Benin Web TV channel. The bloc, adopting a resolution by the provisions of Chapter 5 of the Bamako Declaration, said the suspension is with the immediate effect. The suspension includes the participation of Nigerian representatives at the meetings of the Francophonie bodies, as well as the suspension of French-speaking multilateral cooperation with these member states, except for programs directly benefiting civilian populations and those contributing to the restoration of democracy. The CPF also called for the immediate and unconditional release of President Mohamed Bazoum, members of his family, as well as those of his government also sequestered. It demands the rapid restoration of constitutional order and democracy in Niger and calls on the transitional authorities to establish a timetable for exiting the transition with a limited duration.
David Vincent filed that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. NewsLink continues.
Beninese President Patrice Talon said on Thursday that he wanted to rapidly restore relations between Benin and its neighbors who have experienced coups. He stated this in his annual address to the nation before the National Assembly. The head of state affirmed that there was a time to condemn, a time to demand, and a time to take stock and take note, referring in particular to Niger, where coup d'etat in July overthrew President Mohamed Bazoum. The sanctions of the international community and the Community of West African States, ECOWAS, against Niger have serious economic consequences for Benin due to the closure of the borders between the two countries. Benin is notably recording a drop in its port revenues following the cessation of the transit of goods to Niger via its port. Let's now head to Guinea-Bissau, where President Umaru Sissoco Embalo appointed Rui Duarte Barros as Prime Minister, replacing Geraldo Martins. According to a source close to the Guinean-Bissau presidency, Rui Duarte Barros was a deputy of Pai Terra Ranca, the majority group formed around the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde in the recently dissolved National Assembly. Tawfiq Abdul Nasser has the details.
President Embalo dissolved Guinea-Bissau's parliament days after what he said was a foiled coup on December 1, accusing the government of passivity in response to the clashes. He then reappointed Martins as prime minister on December 12. The presidential decree did not provide a reason for sacking Martins, who is a member of the former ruling PIGC party, which now leads the main opposition coalition. Sources close to the government said the Prime Minister and the President were at odds. The Barros previously worked as the country's Minister of Economy and Finance and as a Commissioner at the West African Economic and Monetary Union, before serving as Prime Minister in a transitional government between 2012 and 2014. Guinea-Bissau has often been in political turmoil and has seen several coups since it gained independence from Portugal in 1974. Police fired tear gas last week to disperse opposition members of parliament who had tried to convene in defiance of Embalo's decision to dissolve the House. A date for new legislative elections is yet to be set.
Tawfiq Abdul Nasser reporting there. The majority leader in Ghana's parliament, Osei Mensa Bonsu, has led in shooting down reform proposals from the Electoral Commission for the 2024 elections as the House accuses the chairperson of the commission, John Mensah, of breaching its regulations by doing away with the indelible ink. Chairperson of the commission, Mensah, has announced several reforms, including closing polls at 3 p.m. and doing away with indelible ink. WDL's Nadi Tete Accra reports that the majority leader suggests the proposals, if agreed to, will spell doom for the 2024 polls.
During Tuesday's district-level elections, the Commission faced criticism for not deploying indelible ink, a move contested by various groups, particularly the opposition party. In Parliament, as the budget for the Electoral Commission was under review, Sannarugu MP ABA Fuseni pointed out that this action contravened the public elections regulations of the 2020 CI 127, Section 33(2)C, which mandates post-voting marking of every voter. He urged the Speaker to reprimand the EC chairperson.
Mr. Speaker, and I quote with your permission, see, a mark which shall so far as possible be permanent and shall be made on the voter. Using the operating word, Mr. Speaker, shall. So it is not at the discretion of the Electoral Commission or any official of the Electoral Commission to assume a discretion and go ahead to put aside the law and do whatever they like.
Member of Parliament for Buem Kofi Adams criticized the EC's election management, noting the prior postponements and demanding better accountability. Asawase legislator Muntaka Mubarak highlighted voter misplacement due to the EC's registration process, emphasizing the need for corrective measures.
Mr. Speaker, I think that this House has been vindicated, even though we don't seem to be making a lot of noise about it. Those who came forward to register without Ghana card were in real substantial numbers.
The majority leader expressed concerns over the EC's reforms, cautioning of potential adverse outcomes if unchecked.
Fortunately, we agree on the issues that have been raised. That is the application of the indelible ink, the timeous printing and distribution of ballots. What didn't happen this time, and they were blaming the printers. It cannot be an excuse in the conduct of the general and presidential elections next year. So the EC should learn useful lessons from what has happened yesterday and today.
For WADR, Nadidi Teti, Accra.
You're listening to NewsLink on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, and on our partner stations across the sub-region. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Guinea's transitional president Doumbouya declares 3 days of mourning after a deadly central hydrocarbon depot explosion. International Organization of La Francophonie suspends Niger following July 26 coup. The majority leader in Ghana's parliament leads the shooting down of reform proposals from the Electoral Commission. And still ahead, Nigeria's government slashes public transport fare by 50% for Yuletide celebration. We do have a guest interview segment and sports news. Please stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
We're streaming live on WADR.org. Nigeria's government has announced a slash in the price of public transport fares by 50%. This was disclosed by the country's Minister of Solid Minerals, Dele Alake, during a press conference on the presidential intervention in public transportation to celebrate the Yuletide season in Abuja, the nation's capital. According to Alake, the intervention starts today, Thursday, December 21, and ends on January 4, 2024. However, the minister said air travel was excluded from the initiative because the initiative is targeted at the masses. Alake stated that President Tinubu has directed the police, Department of State Services, DSS, the military, and other security agencies to work collaboratively to ensure the holiday period is safe without any security breach in any part of the country.
In the spirit of Christmas and the end-of-year festivities, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, in another demonstration of his love for Nigerians, has approved that the federal government should intervene to bring down the cost of public transportation to allow our compatriots who want to travel to visit their loved ones and hometowns to do so without stress and the extra burden imposed by the high cost of transport around this period. The President is well aware of the recent increase in cost of interstate transportation and even for air travel. Traditionally, therefore, our people love to travel during Christmas and end of year to be with families and friends, and this has been the practice for ages. We also know that globally, intra-country travels and movement of people, goods, and services always peak around Christmas and end of the year because of socio-gravitational pull of the period, which transporters always cash on to increase fares astronomically. In recognition of the economic situation of the country, which the president is working hard to turn around, President Tinubu wants Nigerians to be able to travel within Nigeria to wherever they want to go to meet their loved ones without the extra burden of paying exorbitantly for interstate public transportation.
Nigeria's Minister of Solid Minerals, Dele Alake, speaking there. And over here in Senegal, discussions around the challenges of implementing open government initiatives brought together members of civil society and government representatives in Dakar on Wednesday. On the agenda was the evaluation of the first action plan following Senegal's accession to the Open Government Partnership OGP and the outlook for the second, which states that Senegal must make efforts to meet its commitment. Sankli Janko has more in this report by WDL's Demba Amaan.
5 years after joining, Senegal's track record on good governance remains underwhelming. Of the 12 commitments made, the country has fully met only 2, indicating there is significant progress yet to be made. Alfred Boulakali serves as the regional director for Article 19's platform in Senegal and West Africa.
We are finishing the evaluation, but one of the points, the first commitment, was the law on access to information, which is the hinge in reality towards the realization of many other commitments. I will say that what justifies the delay in the implementation of the commitments, the first is institutional. As I said, Senegal has adhered to the process, but other regulatory and legislative measures remain.
Members of civil society are pressing for the enactment of an access to information law. However, the Department for the Promotion of Good Governance assures that a proposal is actively being developed. Abdul Jao speaks on behalf of the department.
In terms of access to information, we were rated 2 out of 4. For budgetary transparency, 3 out of 4. For citizen participation, we were ranked 4 out of 4. But now, when we have relaunched this project in terms of access to information, we are currently 3 out of 4 because the project has been relaunched and transmitted to the Supreme Court. The General Assembly of the Supreme Court has validated the bill and has made observations. These observations made by the Supreme Court have been included.
The GGP aims to bolster transparency in public initiatives and enhance global governance openness. For Senegal, the task ahead is to amplify its dedication to secure a prominent position within this platform.
Demba Amaan filed a report, and it was voiced by Sankli Janko. In Chad, striking teachers have not received their November 2023 salaries as the government threatens to withhold them. The Chad Teachers Union said crisis committee cites a law allowing the government to suspend salaries for strike days unless the strike stems from delayed payments. The set sees the government's stance as a sign of weakness and calls for continued resistance. Since November 2, a set-led strike has halted Chad's education system. Although temporarily lifted, the strike led to the set executive board's removal. The crisis committee reinstated the strike. Despite the Ministry of Education and Parents Association's calls to resume, the committee remained steadfast. The strike prompted the Ministry of Education to adjust the school calendar, reducing the time and second-term breaks from 10 to 8 days. The rationale was to compensate for loss of instructional time. And away from the sub-region, the Democratic Republic of Congo voted on Thursday on the second day of a chaotic and in parts violent general election after authorities extended opening hours for polling stations that failed to open the previous day. The elections across Africa's second largest country were disrupted on Wednesday by delays in delivering election kits and malfunctioning equipment. People also struggled to find their names on registers, while violence caused chaos in other places. The decision by the Election Commission known as Seni to extend the votes was rejected by 5 presidential candidates who have called for a rerun. Early on Thursday in Kabare in Congo's restive eastern region, 21-year-old Jean-Claude Irenge Kaluma was among the first residents to cast his vote. Sami Mwaza is with Impunity Watch DRC.
Especially here in Goma, I can't say much about the voting of tomorrow, but the late information that I have is that some voting stations opened here somehow back, opened in this evening at something like 6 p.m. And but the thing that we know from the president of the Commission of Elections is that they will extend voting because there are some voting stations that didn't open, and it's more something like 37% of voting station that did not open today because of the lack of materials, and because of that, some people returned home without voting because they said that it took much time than usual. So some people choose to go back home instead of waiting. They don't know where they will start voting, so many people choose to go back home. And there are something like more than 20% of voting station that the place where they delayed the voting, that they said that they will start voting by 6, but we don't know if even tomorrow all the people will be voting.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
In this segment of our guest interview will be my spotlight on the continuous call by the civil space for the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, to adopt term limits for presidents and other heads of government in the region to address a tenure elongation and the leadership crisis in West Africa. According to the West Africa Democracy Network, WADEMOS, a coalition of civil society organizations in West Africa, was imperative to strengthen democracy in the region and curtail the crisis of tenure elongation or heads of state exerting long rules in their countries, leading to coup d'etat. The network coordinator, Paul Oseiku, said that 75% of citizens in 35 African countries favor limiting presidential mandate to 2 terms, citing a research report. He spoke exclusively to WDR.
Limiting term is a very important constitutional instrument. So when you look at the history in West Africa, before the third wave of democratization, we witnessed what we call presidents for life. So a lot of presidents in Africa had stayed in power for very long, and there was no way for pluralistic, competitive political systems or electoral systems for opposition to compete effectively. And that became a source of instability. So you observe a trend where these presidents could only be removed through coup d'etat. So as we transition to the third wave of democratization and in the early 1990s, one of the best practices or the value that we took along was the introduction of term limits. But what we are seeing currently is that term limit is under siege and it's also under attack in most countries in West Africa. And if this is not resolved, we may be revisiting or going back to the era where we had presidents for life. And also currently there are evidence of term limit being the foundation of some of the unconstitutional changes of governments we have in the region. Talk about Guinea, for example. One of the triggers was when the president decided to go for a third term. And that had been used as an excuse by the coupists to justify the removal of a democratically elected president in Guinea. It's been other source of instability in Côte d'Ivoire when the constitution was reset. Similar in Togo, this led to a lot of civil protests, and the police clamped down on these protesters, limiting their freedoms and political rights. So term limit is a major driver of instability, and we need to regulate or standardize it at the regional level.
Laws are only as good as the people who apply them. Don't we have a problem with the people? Let me give you an instance. When Nigeria was planning for its election, people would want to support their candidates. Same thing in Ghana, same thing in Côte d'Ivoire and other countries in the sub-region. Are people not the problem?
There is popular consensus at regional level and at national level regarding the need to standardize term limits in West Africa. So the people are not a problem, and the evidence is grounded strongly in Afrobarometer findings. We have 7 out of 10 people expressing support for term limits as a democratic value that needs to be entrenched in constitution. So the people have decided, they have given their voice. They say they want term limit.
It's only in countries where we have unconstitutional changes in government, where there are strong variations in the responses that were gathered. But there is broad consensus. And there cannot also be any better time. If you look at the regional level too, the timing, the conditions, is really right at this stage, right? If you look at ECOWAS itself has come to the realization that the current challenges and threats that we are facing in the region cannot be responded effectively by the current state of the protocol on democracy and good governance, the current framing that it has at the moment cannot enable ECOWAS to respond appropriately. And that is why ECOWAS on itself has initiated the process to revise the supplementary protocol on democracy and good governance. And at the last meeting and the previous meeting, this has come up a lot. So the timing from the perspective of citizens, there is strong support and approval, even in countries that have opposed revision of term limits. Currently, some of them have term limits. Togo, purportedly, and Gambia that currently does not have a term limit. Ivory Coast, they have reset their constitutions, changed the term, but currently have some form of term limit in their constitution. So we are in a good position to move the campaign forward and to get the regional body to really accept and standardize term limits in West Africa.
Paul Osei-Kufo is the network coordinator of Wadr. And here is Sport News with Sankle Janko.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The head coach of the Ghana national football team, Chris Hughton, has named Arsenal's Thomas Partey in Ghana's provisional squad for the Africa Cup of Nations. Partey has been included in the provisional 55-man squad despite an injury that has kept him out of action for over 3 months. The squad will be trimmed down to 23 players by January 3, ahead of the final submission for the tournament in Cote d'Ivoire next month. Partey made only 4 appearances this season in the English Premier League for Arsenal and has been on the sidelines with an hamstring injury since October. The midfielder, who is thought to be nearing a return for Arsenal, will still not be available for the Gunners this year. Although Arsenal will not be happy with the inclusion of Partey in Ghana's provisional squad, Black Stars head coach Chris Hughton says that Arsenal will not be able to prevent Partey from joining up with the national team if he is named in the final squad. Meanwhile, Hughton has named 11 Ghana Premier League players in the Black Squad's provisional 55-man squad for the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations to be hosted in Ivory Coast. Ghana's neighbors, Nigeria, have also announced a provisional 40-man squad for the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations in Cote d'Ivoire 2023. The inclusion of 31-year-old Ahmed Musa by coach Jose Pesero and his technical crew has raised eyebrows among football stakeholders in Nigeria. The inclusion of only 3 players from the domestic Nigerian league, who are all goalkeepers, have also sparked debate among football lovers in the country. Interesting times ahead of the AFCON next month. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And we've come to the end of this edition of NewsLink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Christian Mukudi and Maudajou for the technical assistance. Let's continue the conversation on our social media platforms: X, formerly Twitter, Instagram at WDL News, and Facebook West Africa Democracy Radio English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our flagship environment program, Enviroscope. I am Imo Edet. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to NewsLink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0, and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM, Lofa County. For you listening via Radio Pad 95.1 Damango, Savannah region, and on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi, Ghana, we say a big thank you. Remember, West Africa Democracy Radio is all about you, your views, and your opinions.